Welcome to Delta Wave History, your sanctuary for functional, historical boredom. Our focus will remain on the historical, methodical, numerical, and the procedural. This allows your mind to unwind and drift into historical details. Please adjust your volume for a consistent, even tone. We aim for a predictable vocal rhythm, devoid of sudden shifts in pitch or intensity, designed to facilitate a state of tranquil observation and sleep, if you wish. Tonight, we are stepping into the dimly lit, perfectly quiet studio of a 15th century master. For centuries, art historians have marveled at the sudden, almost inexplicable leap in realism during the early Netherlandish Renaissance. Paintings by masters like Jan van Eyck feature microscopic details, from the faint stubble on a man's chin to the intricate mathematical weave of a wool tapestry. But what if this leap wasn't solely the result of an evolutionary jump in human hand-eye coordination? What if it was the result of a hidden, highly sophisticated optical technology? This is the premise of the Hockney-Falco thesis, a fascinating exploration into the use of concave mirrors and optical projections in classic art. As we delve into the mechanics of this theory, allow the slow, methodical processes of Renaissance mirror making to ease your busy mind. In the early 1400s, the production of glass was a painstaking, deliberate process, entirely devoid of the industrial rush of the modern world. To create a concave mirror, artisans first had to blow a perfect sphere of glass using a long, hollow iron pipe. The glassblower would gather molten silica from a roaring furnace, carefully rotating the heavy pipe to form a glowing orange orb. Once the sphere was formed, it was allowed to cool incredibly slowly in an annealing oven. This specific cooling process could take several days just to prevent the fragile glass from shattering under its own thermal stress. After cooling, the artisans would carefully score and cut a single shallow section from the larger glass sphere. This shallow, ball-like section of glass provided the exact concave geometry required for optical projection. However, clear glass alone cannot reflect an image with enough clarity to be useful to a working painter. The glass needed to be coated with a reflective backing, a process known as silvering, though in the 15th century, actual silver was rarely used for this purpose. Instead, artisans utilized a delicate, slow curing and highly toxic amalgam of tin and mercury. A thin sheet of tin foil would be laid perfectly flat on a meticulously smoothed stone table. Liquid mercury was then carefully rubbed into the tin, dissolving the metal just enough to create a shimmering, liquid amalgam. The concave glass was then pressed firmly onto this amalgam, and heavy lead weights were placed on top to squeeze out the excess mercury. This entire assembly was left to sit undisturbed for weeks, allowing the amalgam to slowly harden and adhere securely to the curved glass. The result was a dark, somewhat murky, but highly functional concave mirror. When natural light hits a concave mirror, it does not simply bounce straight back as it does with a standard flat mirror. Instead, the inward curve of the glass causes the parallel rays of light to converge at a specific mathematical point in space, known as the focal point. If an object is placed far enough away from the mirror, the reflected light rays will cross at this focal point and continue outward into the room. If you place a flat surface, such as an oak panel, in the path of these crossing rays, a perfect image of the object will appear. Because the light rays have physically crossed paths, the projected image will always be inverted, meaning it appears completely upside down to the observer. For a painter like Jan van Eyck, this optical phenomenon offered a revolutionary tool for capturing the exact geometry of the physical world. However, setting up this early cinematic technology was a slow, incredibly tedious endeavor that required absolute patience. The painter's studio had to be plunged into almost total darkness to act as a massive camera obscura. A single small hole or a carefully positioned gap in the heavy oak window shutters would allow a focused beam of brilliant sunlight to enter the room. The subject of the portrait would have to sit outside in this glaring, direct sunlight, remaining perfectly still for hours on end. The light, bouncing off the subject's face, would travel through the small opening in the shutter and strike the concave mirror, positioned deep within the dark studio. The mirror would then catch this light, concentrate it, and project the living, upside-down ghost of the subject onto the painter's wooden easel. The artist would sit in the darkness, waiting patiently for their eyes to adjust to the dim, ethereal projection. Once their vision fully adapted, they could see the exact contours, shadows, and highlights of the subject mapped perfectly onto the wood. The painter would then begin the slow, methodical process of tracing these projected lines. But before any paint or ink could be applied, the oak panel itself had to be prepared with the utmost care and repetition. A master carpenter would carefully select and join thick planks of Baltic oak, ensuring the wood grain was perfectly aligned to prevent future warping. The surface of the wood was then sanded down using dried fish skin until it was exceptionally smooth to the touch. Next came the application of gesso, a foundational mixture made from heated rabbit skin glue and finely ground white chalk. The rabbit skin glue was gently heated in a double boiler over a low, steady flame until it dissolved into a thin, sticky liquid. The chalk was slowly sifted into the warm glue, the apprentice stirring constantly to prevent any microscopic lumps from forming in the mixture. This warm gesso was then brushed onto the oak panel in thin, perfectly even layers. The artist would wait for each layer to dry completely before applying the next, a monotonous process repeated up to 15 times. Once the final layer of gesso had dried, the panel was polished with a smooth agate stone or a bundle of rough reeds until it gleamed like solid ivory. Only then was the panel ready to receive the delicate, traced lines from the mirror's dim projection. The tracing itself was done using a fine stylus made of silver or lead, or perhaps a remarkably thin brush dipped in a watery mixture of carbon black. The artist had to work meticulously, tracing the upside-down features exactly as they appeared in the projection, trusting the optical science over their own intuition. But the projection was not without its mechanical flaws, and these very flaws are what give away the secret of the mirror technology today. Concave mirrors of the 15th century suffered from a phenomenon called spherical aberration, meaning the outer edges of the projected image would curve and blur slightly out of focus. To keep the image sharp, the artist had to constantly adjust the mirror or the panel, physically refocusing on different parts of the subject. This piecemeal approach to focusing often resulted in subtle, shifting perspectives within the final painting. If you look closely at some Renaissance portraits, you might notice that a hand appears slightly out of proportion, or the geometric pattern on a table rug suddenly shifts its vanishing point. These minute optical distortions are the mechanical footprints of the concave mirror, a silent testament to the artist's reliance on primitive lenses. Once the drawing was thoroughly complete, the heavy wooden shutters were pushed open, flooding the room with soft, natural light once again. The artist could now begin the long, laborious process of mixing the oil paints. In the 15th century, there were no tubes of pre-mixed paint to rely upon. Every single color had to be ground by hand in the studio. A small pile of raw, dry pigment was placed in the center of a perfectly smooth slab of porphyry or granite. The apprentice would add just a few drops of highly purified linseed or walnut oil to the dry powder. Using a heavy glass or stone muller, they would grind the pigment and oil together, pressing down with a slow, continuous, circular motion. Round and round the muller would go, the quiet scraping sound echoing softly against the stone walls of the studio. This repetitive grinding process could take hours for a single color, ensuring the microscopic pigment particles were suspended perfectly within the sticky oil. Some raw pigments were notoriously difficult and time-consuming to work with. Lapis lazuli, a precious blue stone imported from the distant mountains of Afghanistan, had to be kneaded with warm wax and pine resin before the pure blue color could be extracted with lye. Lead white, the foundational opaque color used for all highlights, was created by suspending heavy coils of lead over vats of vinegar buried in warm horse manure. The acidic fumes from the vinegar would slowly oxidize the lead over several months, creating a thick, white crust that was carefully scraped off and ground into fine powder. As the artist applied these hand-ground, laborious paints to the traced panel, they used a technique called glazing. Glazing involved applying incredibly thin, translucent layers of oil paint, one over the other. Because natural oil paint dries very slowly through oxidation rather than evaporation, each single layer could take days or even weeks to fully cure. The artist would apply a wash of thin, brownish shadow, then set the panel aside on a wooden rack to dry in the quiet, undisturbed air of the studio. Days later, they would return to apply a thin layer of crimson lake or a delicate, barely visible tint of yellow ochre. Layer by layer, the portrait would build in depth and luminosity, the light traveling through the translucent glazes and bouncing back from the white gesso beneath. This layered luminosity is exactly what gives Renaissance paintings their characteristic, glowing realism. The entire process, from the slow cooling of the glass sphere to the final drying of the uppermost glaze, was a masterclass in patience, isolation, and mechanical precision. It was a quiet world, governed strictly by the slow, deliberate pace of natural materials and the silent observation of light. There was no rush, no immediate gratification, only the steady, rhythmic application of craft over the passage of months and years. As we reflect on this slow, methodical world, feel your own breathing naturally match the calm, measured pace of the Renaissance studio. The dust motes dance slowly in the single fading beam of sunlight entering the room. The subtle smell of linseed oil and warm beeswax fills the air, comforting, heavy, and familiar. The rhythmic scrape of the muller on the stone slab becomes a distant, soothing hum in the background of your mind. The projected image on the oak panel fades entirely into the gentle darkness as the sun finally sets outside the window. The soft sable brushes are carefully cleaned and laid to rest in their wooden boxes. The studio falls completely quiet, wrapped in the protective stillness of the encroaching night. Discover more history by watching the next video. We're eager to share more with you. You can't go wrong. All our videos are deeply detailed, dull while fascinating, and distinctly sleep-inducing. But